been able to look at the Old Testament and say, wow, that kind of was a constant snare to the ancient Israelites. So I think a lot of people genuinely did not know, because if you're not telling me this in the pulpit, where you have to remember a lot of those people, especially back in the day, not so much now, things are so different now, but especially back in the day, and just, we have to remember a lot of these people are Catholic because it's been passed down to them through just various generations. Mm-hmm. A lot of the priests at one point weren't even literate. It was like the higher up clergy who were literate and knew who said what and when they said it and when this decree was made or whatever, so there's that. Now, regarding my friend, and I think a lot of people, again, I've mentioned I'm a history buff. I'm a quarter Irish. I'm drawn to my Celtic background because, my grandmother died when my father was about 11 years old. So that's always been a sort of an intrigue for me. So that's how I stumbled upon the history of Halloween. Mm-hmm. But how many people do you know that just sit around studying Celtic history? They don't talk about it in school, So a lot of people, honest to goodness, do not know the nature of Halloween. And especially when people come in and say, oh, the church, sanctified this or made this a day to remember our dearly departed dead. Okay, that's still not scriptural. But again, if you're not connecting the point, if you don't know the history, you are innocent. And there's a verse, I believe in the book of Acts, where the apostles are saying, there was a time when God winked at our ignorance, but not anymore,
Ooh, yeah.
And I think that in certain cases, God winks, if you will, at our ignorance, kind of like a parent who's like, okay, that was wrong, sweetheart, but you didn't know. And it doesn't mean that if we've sinned, we haven't sinned. But there is a period of grace. God will, we can't say when that period of grace will run out, but there is a period of grace. And a lot of parents, especially my parents' generation, they grew up letting their kids celebrate Halloween at least a couple times. I remember we probably did it 2 or 3 years, actually went trick-or-treating. We had to dress up as Bible characters, which is really annoying. My parents didn't know. They didn't know that there was anything wrong with it. And then as they begin to see and understand, or whether it be documentaries, and a lot of Christian ministries do put out, like I think back in the day, John Hagee did one. A lot of former witches now who are ministers will do teachings on Halloween. I know Doreen Irving talked about it briefly on my website. When you go to Witchcraft and Deliverance Chronicles, you hear Carol Kornacki, who's a former solitary witch, just break it all the way down, and people just don't know. If they don't have that information, they don't know. So I can't hold you responsible for something that you don't know. But now that I'm telling you, you can't stand before God and say that you didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so are they innocent? Yes and no. As far as the leadership of the Catholic Church over the years, that's where I have the problem, because you have access to the Word of God. Even before the people did, just again, historically speaking. So you are practicing something that has no business in Christianity anywhere. And it's called compromise. You made it fancy and called it syncretism, but let's just be plain and use layman's terms and call it compromise. That's what you've done. And so it's, again, I'm not bashing the Catholic Church, because there was a point, the Catholic Church is just the sort of passed on version of, and I want to say this delicately and carefully, there was a point where, that's what the early church morphed into. The problem that we ran into was when the church fathers started saying, well, that bit of doctrine there's a little bit problematic for us, and that little piece over there, I don't like that so much. Or, like I'll use the example of Genesis 6:1-4, which, I like to refer to because it deals with the sons of God and the daughters of men.
Exactly.
We know, you and I know, and people who've done their homework know that this is talking about the sons of God being fallen angels, Benai Elohim,
Mm-hmm.
and the daughters of men just being whatever women they happen to be attracted to. It doesn't mean it was the sons of judges or magistrates.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it was the sons of Seth and the daughters of Cain. Because when you put a human and a human being together, you're not going to get a non-human being or a humanoid. That's just not possible,
Exactly.
But this was problematic for the Catholic Church. So they said, we're having problems trying to force this unnatural state of celibacy on our monks. So if the angels who stood in the presence of God time without mind, and were created specifically to heed the voice of the word of God, can fall into sexual sin, how much more so these human monks? So they changed it. And also, they were having genuine problems with angel worship at the time. And so they set aside the general understanding passed down from the Jews that was just in place until, I believe, medieval times or maybe the Middle Ages, and they changed it and said, okay, it's either the sons of Seth and the daughters of Cain, or just the sons of judges and magistrates and pretty women. And so you find a lot of those things happening throughout Catholic history, saying, okay, this isn't convenient for us, so we're going to switch it over here. And that's why Martin Luther had to go ahead and on October 31st, nail the 95 Theses to the Wittenberg Castle door and say, hey, we are having a problem right now. And I don't want to, his intent was not to destroy the Catholic Church. It was to reform it, but they weren't trying to hear it. But even with those reforms, it's very interesting that holidays such as All Hallows Eve still survive, because they were still celebrated.
And also, I thought the Reformation movement led to different forms of Christianity because of the Catholic Church not following doctrine and doing other things that were atrocities within Europe, that it led to a lot of factions of Christianity. At some point, people just lost faith in the Catholic Church. The church had done a lot of atrocities. They'd been abused by the Catholic Church. And Protestantism was one of those churches that formed as a result of the Catholic Church not following doctrine or not teaching doctrine to its people. But still, you see people who are a part of those other fractionations of the Catholic Church practicing Halloween and some of their members, rather, as if they forgot that this was probably one of the main things that led to Martin Luther putting that letter on the door of the Catholics. Of that Catholic Church. So it's interesting to me. The people have forgotten that. And one thing I wanted to go into, you mentioned Carol Carnacki. Please look at that video. To have someone who was a witch telling you what they used to do and telling you what they experienced to have come out of that is very powerful. But one thing I wanted to know about, that when you say trick or treat, how you're evoking these demonic spirits and you're trying to appease them. And also you had the story of, I think it was from this Christian broadcast network, where this guy gives a story of how he was a Ghostbuster, which I've always, there was maybe a time, I think by the time Ghostbusters type stuff came out, not the movie, but by the time, because I was into that when I was a kid, when I was younger, I wasn't a kid, but I was younger. But by the time all these shows about Ghostbusters came out, I began to hear, even when I thought there were ghosts and perhaps not demons, I said, these people need to just leave these things alone. There's something, I just felt wrong to me. But he actually began to have, I don't know if he was having possession or oppression. It did sound like possession. So I'm wondering, in combination of seeing that you can put yourself around these, whether you're going around in graveyards and ghost busting or buildings, or you're even having your children do something like practicing just wearing these little innocent costumes and going around in Halloween. Now, I can't say that I've seen or heard instances of this, but do you put your child, maybe make them potentially fall prey to some type of demonic oppression or possession when you're actively having them, or you as an adult are practicing Halloween? Is that, I don't know that I've heard that, but do you think that that's possible? Have you ever heard of a case like that?
Well, no, I haven't heard any cases of that. What I will say is, I don't believe, just generally speaking, how the general public celebrates Halloween, fun costumes, and, I'm not talking about getting drunk and doing, performing sacrifices and,
Yeah.
anything that any normal person would recognize as evil. Just the eating of candy and going to parties and different things like that. You're not going to get possessed.
Okay. Thank goodness.
No, but you are still participating in the occult. You don't know it, but you are. And so that does need to be dealt with. But do I think because you let your kids go out and go door to door and trick or treat that they're going to get possessed? No. I think that is ridiculous.
Okay.
But I do believe, Halloween aside, I've heard multiple stories, whether it be from Derek Prince, these other great men of God who had these powerful deliverance ministries. Doesn't mean I agree with everything they said, but as far as deliverance is concerned, for the most part, I generally do. And when you hear stories about these parents who'll bring their children to the minister and say, oh, Derek Prince, or, I'm just using him because he's the best name, most prominent I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
My kid is having these night terrors, or my kid, is sensing something in their room. They're saying, Mommy, Daddy, there's a scary monster in the room, under my bed, in the closet, whatever. And, some of them know what caused it and some of them don't. And they'll say that they'll trace it back to a horror movie. And sometimes they let the kids see it. But a lot of cases, it was just in the house. The parents watched it, or the dad watched it. But your authority as a parent doubles as spiritual authority over your child and over your house and over your environment. So you, as this spiritual authority, have let that into your child's life. And something like that can open them up to a spirit of fear. There's a verse, I forget where in the New Testament, but it's saying, it seems kind of random, but I heard Derek Prince break it down, and I was like, that actually makes sense. And he's talking about, you're the daughters of Sarah, if you will, if you do good. And if you, something like if you do not have fear or do not have terror. And, the Bible tells us, I have not given you a spirit of fear, but through traumatic situations, it could be an accident. But a lot of times I think for kids, it could be movies, whatever it is that causes some sort of mental or emotional trauma for you. A spirit of fear can very easily enter into your life or your child's life. And that's not something you want to do to them. Now when you start getting into the demonic, and I don't want to say that it's not all demonic, but the overtly demonic aspects of Halloween, then yeah, I think you're playing with something. I know you're playing with something that could very well lead, I won't even say all the time, but could very well and most likely lead to demonic possession, or better yet, let's just say demonization.
You mean like when people are really into goth and they're taking it seriously and they're looking for cats to kill or something like that, when they actually start doing rituals as a part of that, then they're opening themselves up to that.
Those are like sort of